Hi, everyone. I'm Vladimir G-Tip. We are watching all the news happening in the United States and around the world. Are we on the cusp of a recession? And is the president okay with it? The new comments from President Trump as Wall Street still tries to get a read on the economy. Plus, a high-stakes meeting in Saudi Arabia. The U.S. tries to bring Russia and Ukraine to the table to bring an end to the fighting. And a desperate search in the Dominican Republic for a college student who went missing on spring break. The warning for other students headed to the island this week. This is CBS News 24/7. But we start with the news in the UK. It's breaking right now. A U.S. oil tanker has collided with a Portuguese container ship. There is a large fire on the tanker. You can see those images right now. Those are coming into us. The incident happened in the North Sea off the coast of East Yorkshire in England. The UK Coast Guard says it has deployed a rescue helicopter, lifeboats, and nearby vessels with, quote, firefighting capability. More on this, I'm joined on the phone by CBS News correspondent Ian Lee. He is headed to the scene at the very moment, but he's on the phone with us now. So, Ian, what can you tell us about this collision? What have you learned so far?
Yeah, we're on our way to Hull, where it's close to where this accident happened. What we're hearing is that at least 32 people have been brought ashore. That's according to authorities. All of the people who are on board the U.S.-flagged ship, the Stena Immaculate, have been accounted for. When this crash happened in the early morning's hours, about just before 10 o'clock, we're hearing that a Portuguese flagship, the Solong, was sailing from the north. That's when it hit the nearly stationary U.S. flagship. A huge fireball erupted. Some people, we are hearing, jumped into the water. And that's when you had that large search and rescue operation, which is presumably still ongoing right now. There is, though, concerns that because this was a container ship, that there could be a large oil spill. Authorities are looking out for that as well. But right now, they're looking to make sure everyone is accounted for.
All right, Ian, the images that we're seeing right now are incredible. And you're saying that right now, as far as we know, that there is no one at risk of losing their life. The folks that have been rescued off of that vessel are now with the UK Coast Guard.
You know, you're right, Vlad. It is pretty remarkable when you look at those pictures. You see the smoke, you see the fireball, and to think that the people, at least on the U.S. flagship, have been accounted for, because we're hearing that that is the ship that erupted into flames. It carries petroleum, it carries petroleum products, and so the fact that that ship was able, that it erupted in such a way and that they were able to account for everyone is probably likely a testament to the training of that crew. We do not know the cause of this crash right now. That is going to be one of the first things that they investigate.
All right, Ian Lee, you're headed to the scene as we speak, as these live pictures come into us here at CBS News. We'll check in with you a little later once you arrive and once you have some more information for us. We appreciate it, my friend. Stay safe. All right, our other big story today, fears over the economy. President Donald Trump said inflation could still rise at the beginning of this new tariff war with Canada, Mexico, and China, but he stopped short when asked if the U.S. economy is headed for a recession. Listen.
I hate to predict things like that. There is a period of transition because what we're doing is very big. We're bringing wealth back to America. That's a big thing. And there are always periods of, it takes a little time. It takes a little time, but I think it should be great for us.
All right, as you can see, Wall Street doesn't like the president's comments. Market dropped 300 points. We're just at the beginning of the day's trading. Nancy Cordes, CBS News chief White House correspondent, is joining me now to talk all about this. It's remarkable, Nancy, to hear a U.S. president suggest that inflation could actually happen under their watch. You don't usually get president saying that, even if it's possibly true, just because you don't want to see what we just showed our viewers now, which is the stock market not liking those remarks and taking a dip. So this all comes, as you know, as China's retaliatory tariffs on the U.S. take effect today. What are we hearing about any possible negotiations?
Yeah, and Vlad, it's not just the U.S. stock market that is reacting negatively. Stock markets all around the world are dipping today after the president's comments. The Chinese tariffs that are going into effect today, 15% tariffs on a lot of U.S. farm products. So we're talking about things like chicken, wheat, corn, soybeans, pork, beef, fruit. And unlike Mexico and Canada, China's taking a kind of hands-off approach. They are not pushing for negotiations. As far as we know, there are no big talks scheduled, particularly not between President Trump and President Xi. The Chinese know that Americans rely on Chinese goods far more than the Chinese rely on U.S. goods. And they also know that the last time we went through this during the first Trump term, that U.S. farmers in particular felt the squeeze. So China is in no hurry to go to the table. They say they want to come to the negotiating table with the U.S. from a position of strength. So they're going to wait and see what the U.S. does.
Yeah, plus, as you know, Nancy, there are no elections for President Xi Jinping to worry about, at least not elections that he has to worry about if he chooses to stay in office. Whereas, as you know, the United States president and all the legislators are constantly worrying about their reelection prospects. And the economy is usually the first thing that people want to know about. So that should be very interesting, the fact that China can wait us out, whereas it's a little bit trickier with Mexico and Canada. Meanwhile, as you know, the president also circled back on his suggestion that Greenland should become part of the United States. What do you have to say about that?
Well, you know, he's tried the stick approach and now he's trying the carrot, and basically trying to welcome Greenland into the United States rather than argue that he's going to go out and buy it or, you know, even potentially invade it. So in a post last night on Truth Social, he said, "We're ready to invest billions of dollars to create new jobs and make you rich, Greenland. And so if you want to, we're going to welcome you to become a part of the greatest nation anywhere in the world." Greenland, as most people know, is a territory of Denmark, and leaders in both Denmark and Greenland have expressed no interest in having the island of Greenland become part of the United States, but that hasn't dampened President Trump's enthusiasm for it. He even brought it up in his joint address to Congress the other night.
Yes, because with an average income of $38,000 and no social safety net, we are rich here in America, Nancy, as you well know. That's what the Greenlanders are thinking as well. Nancy Court is joining us at the White House. Thank you, Nancy, as always, my friend. Appreciate it.
You got it.
All right, we mentioned China's retaliatory tariffs. They go into effect on U.S. farm goods today. 10 and 15% increases are now being applied to everything from cotton to chicken and pork. CBS News foreign correspondent Anna Korn has more from Beijing.
China's retaliatory tariffs came into effect today, hitting key U.S. agricultural products and causing significant pain to American farmers, with China being its largest market in this sector. The tariffs include 15% on U.S. chicken, wheat and corn, and 10% on products like soybeans, pork, beef and fruit. Well, this is in response to the now 20% blanket tariffs President Trump placed on all Chinese goods. I spoke to China economic expert Michael Pettis here in Beijing, who has advised both the Trump and Biden administration on trade, and he believes this trade war between the U.S. and China was inevitable, and making a deal is near impossible.
And this deal of the century that President Trump is after with President Xi, what does that look like?
Honestly, what the U.S. needs is so much the polar opposite of what China needs that I'm not sure there can be a meaningful deal there.
Well, 25 U.S. companies have also been targeted in these retaliatory measures from either doing business in China or buying their products. Michael Pettis says until the global trade imbalances are addressed, this trade war will only escalate. Back to you.
All right, Anna Korn for us. Thank you, Anna. Canada's ruling Liberal Party just elected a new prime minister, economist Mark Carney, and he's warning that his country will not back down in President Trump's trade war. Our Ed O'Keefe is in the Canadian capital of Ottawa with the very latest.
The trade war started by President Trump certainly is going to shake up the global economy, but it has really shaken up Canadian politics. The ruling Liberal Party on Sunday night picking Mark Carney, an economist and the former head of the Bank of Canada, to be its new leader and to become prime minister later this week. His speech, a decidedly anti-Trump message, saying that Canada is going to stand firm against the threatened tariffs from President Trump and never become the 51st American state. Now, polling for months had given the opposition party, Conservatives, a double-digit lead over the Liberals, in part because this country was getting tired of nearly a decade of Justin Trudeau as prime minister. But in recent weeks, polling has shown the gap closing, and the Liberals now potentially with the opportunity to hold on to power. Former Canadian Prime Minister last night even joking, Donald Trump has been so good for Liberal Party politics that they should consider giving him this country's highest civilian honor for doing them the favor. When exactly Canada goes back to the polls remains to be seen. It could happen as early as this month. It has to happen by October. But either way, a race that was once seen as a sleeper and one that was likely going to lead to a change in power might very well now result in the ruling party staying, if only because of President Trump. Ed O'Keefe, CBS News, Ottawa.
All right, Ed, thank you very much. CBS News has learned defense attorneys for the man accused of attempting to assassinate President Trump last September were able to tour the golf course where the incident took place. This tour took place late last month. I want to bring in CBS News Department of Justice correspondent Scott McFarland to talk more about this. So Scott, what have you learned about Ryan Ruth's movements and what his defense team was given access to?
Vlad, this case is moving on a trajectory toward trial. And as is often the case, the defense attorneys want to see some of the evidence up close and personal. So they got access to the Trump golf course to review whatever they wanted to see there. And in what is characterized as a highly unusual move, the Department of Justice sent the rifle allegedly brandished by Ruth that day from Quantico in Virginia to an FBI facility in Florida for closer review by the defense attorneys so they could lay eyes on that. This case has been pressing since September. It's on a pathway towards a September 2025 trial date. And it's hard to overstate the significance of a case that involves an attempted assassination on a former president. Ryan Ruth is in pretrial detention pending that trial, which again goes as early as September.
Scott, sources tell CBS News that there's an initial review by the Justice Department into the price of eggs. This is completely different than what we were talking about, but what are you learning about that?
Yeah, Vlad, shows you the breadth and width of what the Department of Justice does, from criminal cases to possible antitrust reviews. In this case, CBS News has learned a Midwest-based agricultural watchdog group called Farm Action has filed a request with the Department of Justice's Antitrust Division to review why egg prices are so high, whether it has to do with that bird flu or if there are other potentially more pernicious causes that are raising the prices of eggs. We've learned the Department of Justice has begun an inquiry. It's unclear, though, Vlad, if this is going to be a large-scale Department of Justice investigation or whether this is just a response to the Farm Action Group's complaint. We do know, though, from our reporting that Farm Action organization requested the Biden administration do its own investigation as early as January 2023, when it was viewed then as an egg price that was too high. It's a whole different matter now.
All right, Scott McFarland for us. Thank you, Scott, as always. Appreciate it. There's some good news in the air. It's finally starting to feel like spring. Above average temperatures are in store today for most parts of the U.S., but are the warmer temperatures here to stay? So let's bring in CBS News Philadelphia meteorologist Grant Gilmore with the first look at the national forecast. Hey, Grant.
Hey, good morning, Vlad. You know, March is that transition month, so we start to get into some hints of spring. In fact, not just above normal temperatures today. For some folks, looking at record high temperatures potentially. Lincoln, Nebraska going for 81 degrees this afternoon. In fact, the record high temperature there is 78 degrees, so they'll probably have not an issue breaking that record. Des Moines, 75. The record is 75 degrees as well. St. Cloud, Minnesota, 71 degrees. I mean, very hot conditions for this time of the year across the Central Plains up into the Midwestern states. Look at forecast highs all across the northern tier states into the Northeast. Temperatures in the upper 70s to near 80 degrees. Tulsa at 78 degrees, which is 17 degrees warmer than normal. That warmth will shift to the east as we go into the day tomorrow. Places like D.C. looking at a high temperature tomorrow of 71. running 17 degrees above normal. We will see temperatures begin to drop a little as we go into the second half of the week. In the meantime, we're tracking the southeast soaker that will clear the coast as we go through the second half of the day today. Meanwhile, across the rest of the country, relatively calm conditions. You've got those warm conditions across the central United States and dry weather, at least for now, across the south and west. Back to you, Vlad.
All right, Grant, thank you very much. Search is underway for a missing University of Pittsburgh student last seen on a beach in the Dominican Republic. Coming up, what we know about her disappearance and the latest on the investigation. You're streaming CBS News 24/7. Right now, authorities in the Dominican Republic are searching for a University of Pittsburgh student. They say she went missing last week after she went for a walk on the beach while on spring break. I want to bring in CBS News Pittsburgh reporter Erica Moquet for the very latest. So Erica, this is a story that a lot of people are paying attention to. What are you learning?
Absolutely, Vlad. Good morning to you from Pittsburgh. Yeah, so today's the first day back for students at the University of Pittsburgh after spring break, but it was on her spring break trip. The 20-year-old Sadukshu Kananki was last seen. Of course, over the weekend, students started to hear news about her disappearance. We spoke to a few yesterday who are back on campus, and I think the overall feeling right now is just shock and disbelief. They can't believe something like this that's now turning into a national story involves a girl from Pitt.
All right. So the thing that is heartbreaking is that these students returned to campus from spring break over the weekend, and so they're probably wondering what happened to their classmate, Erica. How are they reacting on campus?
Yeah, that's absolutely the case, and that's also the case with investigators, her family. They want to know what happened to her. We do know that she was on that vacation in Punta Cana, the Dominican Republic, with 5 of her friends. Also from the University of Pittsburgh, there has been some surveillance video that has surfaced showing her with her friends and 2 American men. Later, there is some more video that shows that some of those friends and only 1 man came back. She was not with them. And then there is video of that 1 male coming back without her. So still a lot of questions right now, a lot of concern. I did reach out to the University of Pittsburgh. They haven't gotten any updates today. They put out a statement yesterday basically saying that if anyone has any information, they should get in touch with the Loudoun County Sheriff's Office. That's in Virginia, where she's from. I asked if they were expecting to hear something else or get some sort of update at some point. They said they are hoping to later today. Also, I asked if students so far were planning any sort of prayer gathering. And a university spokesperson said at this point they're not aware of any, but they would let me know if something comes together.
Such a terrible story. Hoping that it turns out okay for her family and for her friends. Yeah, Erica Moquet with CBS News Pittsburgh. Thank you, Erica. Appreciate your reporting. Okay, back to politics now. House Republicans are expected to vote on a stopgap measure to prevent a government shutdown. That's supposed to happen this week. The Republican-controlled House and Senate have both passed spending measures, but to this point, they have not yet reached a consensus. So let's bring in CBS News congressional correspondent Caitlin Huey-Burns. All right, Caitlin, what are you hearing as to what is in this continuing resolution?
Hey, Vlad, good to see you. It is Groundhog Day up here on Capitol Hill. Another looming shutdown coming on Friday if Congress doesn't act. Now, over the weekend, House Republicans unveiled their measure, which essentially increases defense spending by about $6 billion, but it decreases domestic spending by about $13 billion. It also includes some more money for immigrations and customs enforcement, also an increase in spending for veterans' health care programs. Now, the big question here is whether Republicans will have the votes to pass this. Democrats came out over the weekend and said they are not going to support this. They don't think it does enough to support Medicaid, Medicare, Social Security, and other programs. So they're voting no. We'll see if they can keep their conference together against this. So that puts the pressure on House Speaker Mike Johnson, who you see there. He can only really afford to lose 1 or 2 votes, depending on attendance. here. And already today, we have Thomas Massie, congressman from Kentucky. You've probably heard his name a lot during these funding fights. He came out today and said he's absolutely against it. It would take a lobotomy, he said, to support this. So already down one vote. We'll see what the rest of them say as they're coming back to Washington today. But even if this passes the House, Vlad, and that vote is expected tomorrow, it still has to get through the Senate, where it will require support from Democrats. And that is no sure bet either. Already you've had Senate Democrats come out and say that they don't like this bill. So we'll see whether 6 or 7 of them can get on board.
So for those who are potentially looking to block this bill, Caitlin, I mean, is that something that you're hearing they might try to do? I know that there's been talk, you know, especially in the wake of the president's address to Congress last week, where people just sort of felt like their measures during that speech were sort of childish and not effective, and the only way to get attention for what they need to get attention for is to do something like this.
Yeah, you know, you always have this constituency in the House Republican Conference that just doesn't like any increases in government spending. They want to see deeper cuts, and that has always kind of beguiled House speakers, not only Johnson, but others in the past. And so last week you had President Trump invite a lot of those members over to the White House, and he was basically saying to them, look, just pass this thing, get it over with, and then you can have those bigger policy arguments on the budget fight, that bigger, you know, line item spending that they want to get done for next year. We'll see if that works. That is the biggest difference, Vlad, between this iteration and the one we saw a few months ago at the end of the year. Remember when Elon Musk helped to blow that all up? The difference this time is President Trump is on board, and he's on board early. So over the weekend, he was taking to social media telling Republicans, you need to stay united around this. Don't have any dissent. He actually used the word please in asking them to vote for this. So he is trying to work here also in keeping the Republican conference together. I mean, this spending bill, though, really just continues to kick the can down the road. It funds the government through the end of September. So that's also what some of these House Republicans don't like either.
All right, Caitlin Huey-Burns for us in the halls of Congress. Caitlin, thank you very much. Appreciate you.
Thank you.
All right, a small plane crash and erupted in flames near a Pennsylvania retirement home. What we know about the fiery incident and the survivors. You're streaming CBS News 24/7. Here's a look at some of the top stories we're following for you this morning. A CarMax customer is accused of plowing his SUV through a showroom in Inglewood, California. 2 people were critically injured and 6 others were wounded. Police say the unidentified driver got into some sort of altercation with the dealership. He is then accused of leaving the building and later slamming through the glass doors. In Pennsylvania, a small plane crashed near a retirement community in Manheim Township that is about a half-hour west of Philadelphia. The fire from the crash engulfed the plane and several parked cars. Amazingly, all 5 people on board survived but sustained injuries, and no one inside the home was hurt. The FAA is investigating the incident. And Maryland is the latest state to confirm a case of the measles. Health officials say the infected person traveled internationally recently, but it's not clear if they were vaccinated. They are warning travelers who went through the international arrivals area at Washington Dulles Airport or visited the pediatric emergency department at a hospital in Columbia, Maryland, about possible exposures. All right, Secretary of State Marco Rubio is heading to Saudi Arabia this morning for talks between the U.S., Ukraine, and Ukrainian officials, aimed at ending the war with Russia. CBS News foreign correspondent Holly Williams has more from Western Ukraine.
It's been 10 days since that explosive meeting between President Volodymyr Zelensky and President Trump in Washington. Following that, the U.S. suspended the delivery of military aid and intelligence sharing with Ukraine, both of those vital to this country's defense. Now, yesterday, Trump said that the pause on intelligence sharing had just about been lifted, but gave no further details. Meanwhile, diplomatic wheels are turning. Ahead of that meeting in Saudi Arabia tomorrow, a senior U.S. official says Ukraine wants to move forward. President Zelensky is visiting Saudi Arabia today. Here in Ukraine, though, there is deep anxiety about President Trump's upending of U.S. support 3 years after Vladimir Putin invaded this country. Last month, Trump inaccurately called Zelensky a dictator. In fact, one Ukrainian poll found that trust in Zelensky has soared to 68% here in Ukraine following his public dressing down at the White House. Zelensky stressed over the weekend that his country has always wanted peace. But the fear here in Ukraine and in Europe is that Vladimir Putin could use a ceasefire to buy time and then invade again in the future. And to stop that happening, they want the U.S. to contribute to security guarantees. Back to you.
All right, Holly, thank you very much. I want to bring in Steven Sestanovich for more. He's a former U.S. State Department ambassador at large for the former Soviet Union. He's also a senior fellow for Russian and Eurasian Studies at the Council of Foreign Relations. Thanks so much for joining us, sir.
Pleasure.
So break down for our viewers what the United States hopes to accomplish with these talks.
Well, American officials say they want to be sure that Ukraine is moving toward peace, is ready for a ceasefire or some kind of settlement with the Russians. What they mean by this is a little unclear. Does it mean accepting Russian territorial gains, moving toward elections, which some people have talked about, even possibly getting Zelensky to resign, getting Ukraine to accept that it won't be part of NATO? These are all Russian goals, which the United States seems to have kind of made a sticking point, or at least a test of Ukrainian intentions. The Ukrainian goals are a little different. They want to sign this minerals deal that was supposed to have been signed by Trump and Zelensky last 10 days ago. They want to get a resumption of military and intelligence aid. And they want to find out how the U.S. is approaching these talks with the Russians. They want a little more transparency.
So the question, I mean, it really does feel as if the United States, at least from the President Trump's position, is that Ukrainians have no. The president himself said it in the Oval Office. He told Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky, "You don't have the cards. You don't have the cards." From the Ukrainian perspective, what they would want is a security guarantee from the United States that, sure, if we agree to give everything that you say the Russians should have, that at the very least we get a security guarantee if they break their promises, because we know what happened with those Minsk Accords, that the United States would somehow be able to guarantee Ukrainian security. We don't seem to be willing to give that.
That's true. We aren't willing to give it right now, or at least President Trump isn't willing to give it right now in the form in which many European governments want and many American experts have suggested, and that is through membership in NATO. President Zelensky has said he understands NATO membership is not for now, not for the foreseeable future, but he wants to know what other kinds of security guarantees the United States would offer so that Ukraine does not have to worry about a resumption of attacks.
Right, because it doesn't seem at this point that Vladimir Putin, well, everybody, the European community and European leaders have suggested that Vladimir Putin can't be trusted. And so why is the United States willing to invest that level of trust in President Putin when he hasn't shown himself capable of earning that trust?
Yeah, I mean, trust is, of course, one question, but another is just what his formal positions are. The American side has emphasized that Ukrainians have to prove that they're interested in peace by changing their goals and their approach to negotiations. But there's been no change in that respect by the Russians. The Russians still embrace all of their long-term goals, which are to dominate Ukraine, to break its ties with the West, to limit its military capabilities. So if you were just judging by the way in which they talk in public, you wouldn't think the Russians are intending to take a different approach toward peace.
So if you are Vladimir Putin,
whether,
sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, go ahead. Well, I was going to say, The question about whether Russians can be trusted, I think, has a lot to do with what Western supporters of Ukraine intend to do if he breaks agreements or if he invades Ukraine again. The real question about deterring Putin isn't so much whether he's a good guy. We know he isn't, but whether he would be confident of American and Western pushback in the event that he breaks an agreement. And right now, the signals from the Trump administration are that, they might push back and they might not push back, or they might leave it to the Ukrainians, they might leave it to the Europeans. From that point of view, Putin is getting more confidence that he can agree to things and then maybe not live up to them because there won't be any penalty for breaking the agreement.
That you essentially answered the question that I was going to ask you, which let's say President Trump is able to bring about a peaceful resolution. What would happen in the case of Vladimir Putin breaking any kind of agreement that is made if, in this instance, he was essentially not held accountable for his actions when he invaded Ukraine? And of course, then the question becomes, when you're another world leader, another despot looking at what's happening here, it becomes easier to see a path forward if the United States, given the fact that President Trump has suggested that he wants the United States to be a more isolationist country, that you could also make incursions into your neighbor's territory without any penalty or facing any repercussions from the United States. And I'm specifically looking at countries like for example, China.
Yeah, lots of people have said the Chinese are watching this confrontation very carefully. But I think in the first instance, we really need to look at how Putin reads the situation and whether he thinks, in 2 years or 4 years, he can just have another go at it. And right now, Western governments are quite divided about how they would respond. That's why there's been a lot of interest in actually putting British and French troops, not necessarily at the front lines, but present in Ukraine to be a symbol of connectivity between the Western alliance and what happens in Ukraine. If Putin knows that he has to risk confronting British and French forces in resuming war, he might be a little more reluctant to start it.
Yeah, and Stephen, in just 30 seconds, could the Europeans, to be fair to President Trump, who suggested that the Europeans should take up the bulk of protecting their continent more than the United States has in the past, could the Europeans alone, French, British, Eastern Europeans, who are countries who are part of NATO, alone hold Putin at his own borders if it needed to come to that?
Right now, it'd be tough, but of course, Europeans are increasing their defense budgets. They've increased their defense spending much more since the war started than the United States has. So we should not belittle the seriousness of their efforts.
Yeah, for sure. And that is something that Vice President J.D. Vance was accused of doing when he suggested that British interests, they had not spilled any blood in recent years, when, of course, they've been at our side going back to the First World War. Stephen Sestanovich, thank you very much for your insight and your analysis. We appreciate it. Thank you.
Thanks.
All right, Elon Musk and his Doge team are facing new questions about their authority to slash the federal workforce. The president suggested last week that Musk simply makes recommendations. Let's bring in CBS News White House reporter Olivia Rinaldi. So the president weighed in on the tension between Musk and some cabinet members. What can you tell us about that?
Yeah, Vlad, it's good to be with you. President Trump spent largely most of the weekend kind of cleaning up after there was some reporting of a rift between Elon Musk and members of the cabinet, specifically Secretary Marco Rubio and Secretary Duffy, the transportation secretary. Trump actually dined with Rubio and Musk at Mar-a-Lago on Saturday night, and he also fired off a Truth Social, essentially saying everything is fine between the two and that there's no issues between them. But we know that there was some back and forth between the two men during an cabinet meeting. We don't know if it was in the Oval Office, about the cuts to U.S. aid, to the State Department, who's essentially in charge there. Trump also weighed into this on a flight back last night from Florida on Air Force One. Take a listen to what he had to say there.
Elon's a very special person, and these cabinet people are special people. You know, these are very successful people, or they wouldn't have gotten, you know, they've attained the highest heights of government. And I think they have a fantastic relationship to Elon. And Doge has been incredible. You know, hundreds of billions of dollars of waste and fraud and abuse has been already found. And that doesn't mean they don't have a little bit of an argument here and there about something, or maybe personnel arguments. There's not too many contract arguments. You know, contracts have been found. This is much more than just personnel.
So Trump's defending the actions of Doge and who they are cutting, but also important to note that after all of this conversation over the weekend between Musk and Rubio at Mar-a-Lago, this morning, Secretary Rubio announced on on X rather, that the State Department is officially canceling about 83% of USAID contracts. And this is a direct result of some of the cuts that Elon Musk had asked, or really enforced rather, on that agency. So important to see this little power dynamic at play here.
It is indeed. Let me ask you about something else, Olivia. What do we know about cuts to the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, NOAA?
Yeah, CBS News learned that NOAA is planning to cut about 1,000 people. This comes on top of 800 people, probationary employees that were fired and let go last month. This is all coming as part of what the Office of Personnel Management asked these agencies to do, which was to submit their reduction in force plans. So we know that leaders at NOAA came up with this plan to let go about 1,000 employees. They are presenting these plans to the Department of Commerce. Now, the Department of Commerce can either agree to take those plans or send them back and say you need to cut more people, less people. So we'll be watching to see exactly how many people are going to be cut. A reminder that these plans must be submitted by all agencies by March 13th.
All right, Olivia Rinaldi for us. Thank you, Olivia, as always, my friend. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
More than 1,000 people have reportedly been killed in Syria. Coming up, what triggered the violence and what's being done to stop it. You're streaming CBS News 24/7. U.S. and Russian diplomats are calling for the UN Security Council to meet today amid growing violence in Syria. Clashes between Syrian forces and loyalists of ousted President Bashar al-Assad have reportedly spiraled into revenge killings. According to the UK-based Syrian Observatory for Human Rights, more than 1,000 people, mostly civilians, have been killed in the fighting, though CBS News has not verified those figures. Joining us for more on this from the capital of Syria, Damascus, is BBC News Middle East correspondent Lena Sinjab. Lena, thanks so much for joining us now. So just explain to our viewers, how did this violence all start in the wake of the Assad family's downfall?
Well, to put a little bit of context, after the toppling of Assad regime, all the security apparatus officers and your army officers who've been involved in the killing, disappeared. Some came to the newly appointed government, to the new interim government, to hand over weapons, to do reconciliation. But others who have blood on their hands disappeared and hide in the mountains. They are the ones who are, wanted for their war crimes, for the killing, torturing of, hundreds of civilians. But what started recently on Thursday, the remnants of the Assad regime, who announced also forming a rebellion in the mountains, ambushed new members of the new security, killing dozens of them. And that's when the interim government at the moment sent reinforcement to the coastal cities to, arrest and chase those, remnants of the regime. But unfortunately, members of the security officers have committed crimes, and that's also by acknowledgement by the new interim government. Some of the villages, there were factions who entered these villages. They were accompanied with even foreign fighters. Some of the witnesses I've spoken to told me that they were like either Uzbek or Chechens. They were looting. They were killing families in their own homes. Some are, complete families were killed, men, women, and children. But the vast majority, we believe, that the ones who've been killed are men from the Alawite community.
Terrible. Lena, thank you so much for breaking this down for us. We appreciate it. All right, immigration officials have confirmed they arrested a former Columbia University graduate student who helped organize Palestinian protests on campus last year. The arrest comes just days after the Trump administration pulled federal funding for the school, saying it did not do enough to fight anti-Semitism on campus. CBS News New York reporter Christina Fan has more.
Good morning. Mahmoud Khalil was a well-known figure here at Columbia University, known for leading pro-Palestinian demonstrations here last spring. His attorney has vowed to file a vigorous legal challenge in court, accusing the government of openly repressing student activism. Federal immigration agents arrested Khalil Saturday night. According to his attorney, Amy Greer, he was taken into custody inside his university-owned apartment while with his pregnant wife. Greer says federal agents claim they were fulfilling a State Department order to revoke his student visa, and when she told them he was a legal permanent resident with a green card, they said they were revoking that instead. A spokesperson with the Department of Homeland Security released a statement saying that the arrest was in support of President Trump's executive orders prohibiting anti-Semitism, claiming that Khalil led activities aligned to Hamas, a designated terrorist organization. Khalil's arrest signifies an escalation in President Trump's vow to deport foreign students and imprison agitators involved in protests against Israel's war in Gaza. It is unclear where Khalil is being held. His attorney says he may have been transferred as far as the state of Louisiana. Reporting from Morningside Heights, Christina Fan, CBS News, New York.
All right, we'll have much more news ahead. Stay with us. You're streaming CBS News 24/7. The Vatican says Pope Francis showed signs of progress as he battles double pneumonia this weekend. It's been nearly a month since he was admitted to the hospital and about a week since he suffered some troubling setbacks. CBS News foreign correspondent Chris Livesay has more from Rome.
Well, it's been several days of uneventful news for Pope Francis, and that is indeed good news for the 88-year-old pontiff who is still hospitalized for double pneumonia. The Vatican is reporting that he is in stable condition, and this is a week after the pontiff suffered from 2 episodes of acute respiratory insufficiency. That was indeed a scary moment in this hospitalization that is nearing the 1-month mark. Doctors had to intervene and aspirate his air passageways, but here we are a week later, and he's showing these mild signs of improvement. Nevertheless, he does remain in very serious condition. The Vatican says that his prognosis is guarded, meaning they cannot predict if he is going to get better or worse. We got a bit of an indication of how well he's doing last week when he made for the first ever an audio message available for the faithful, specifically those who've been gathering right behind me in St. Peter's Square every night to recite the rosary on his behalf. You could hear a very enfeebled pontiff, but also just the fact that we could hear from the pontiff at all was in itself a very encouraging sign. Back to you.
All right, Chris, thank you very much. Take a look at this. A Massachusetts kayaker rescued 2 pups that fell into icy water. Zanklad Lalonde was out on the Sudbury River just west of Boston when he spotted these 2 black labs chasing geese before they fell through some ice. He told CBS Boston the puppies were swimming themselves to exhaustion trying to get out of the river, so he managed to paddle over and help them safely escape. The labs were then reunited with their grateful owner. Lalonde, who was fishing for his YouTube channel, said he was just glad that he was there. Love this story. Let's bring in CBS News Philadelphia meteorologist Grant Gilmore with the last look at the national forecast. Grant.
Vlad, it's that time of year where we start to get more of that warmth. A lot of the ice across the north all begins to thin out and melt. Got to be careful with that. But we're also looking at near record, if not record heat across the plains and Midwest today. Dry out toward the west for now, but I want to show you this as we go into the middle of the week. We've got a storm system, another atmospheric river event that's going to be bringing quite a bit of rain to Southern California, but more so as we go into Tuesday and Wednesday. A lot of a concern across the northwest into the whole coast of California, where we'll see heavy rain, a lot of mountain snow. That'll be the system to track as we go through the middle of the week. Vlad, back to you.
All right, Grant, thank you very much. I'll see you tomorrow, brother. That does it for me. Stay right where you are, though. After the break, Mugo Odiwe is live from San Francisco with all the news breaking from coast to coast. This is CBS News 24/7.